Once upon a time, a kid with a very special purple crayon lived in a magical world. This wasn't just any crayon, it was magical. Whatever he drew with it came to life. Trees, monsters, you name it. One day, he had a brilliant idea. What if I draw a door to the real world? And just like that, he opened a portal with his magical crayon. Now, let's dive into this adventure. If it's your first time here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for all the fun. So, it all begins with our author explaining that this kid, our hero, can create anything he imagines. He draws a tree, it springs to life. He sketches a monster, it roars to life. Then, he draws an ocean and, oh, he starts to drown. Quick thinking saves the day as he draws a boat and sails to safety. In a flurry of creativity, he even conjures up a porcupine and a moose. Naturally, they all become best friends, spending their days playing, eating, and causing delightful chaos. Fast forward a bit, and our little artist has grown up into a man named Harold. With his trusty crayon, he's created a stunning world where he and his friends fly through the air. If he ever starts to fall, he simply draws some wings to land safely. Talk about a smooth landing. But one day, Harold has a light bulb moment. Wait a minute, I drew my friends, but who drew me? The author, who's been watching all this unfold, chimes in, surprise. You drew yourself. Harold is flabbergasted and curious. What do you look like, he asks. The author replies, I'm just like you, but older. Harold gets excited. Oh, you're the creator. I'll definitely meet you someday. After that, he goes to sleep with dreams of meeting the old man. But when he wakes up the next day, his world is eerily quiet. Old man, are you there? No response. Harold searches high and low using his crayon, even venturing into space, but he can't find the author anywhere. His porcupine friend suggests he's probably busy in the real world. This only makes Harold more curious about what's out there. So, he draws the door to the real world once more, revealing a shimmering portal. Stay here, friends, he tells the porcupine and moose, and with that, he steps through to see what the real world has in store for him. Through the portal, Harold jumped into the real world and couldn't believe his eyes. There were real people everywhere, and guess what? He was now a real human too. Meanwhile, his curious porcupine friend wanted to join him, but the moose wasn't having it. No way. The moose protested, looking skeptical. But the porcupine had a plan. With a cheeky little poke of her thorn, she gave the moose a nudge, and boom! The moose landed in the real world, transforming into a panicking human. Harold, he yelled, darting around like he'd just seen a ghost. Harold then ran into a jogging man who took one look at his quirky outfit and blurted, What are you wearing? Realizing he looked like a cartoon character stuck in a fashion disaster, Harold quickly dashed off to a free clothing camp to upgrade his wardrobe. Feeling a bit more stylish, he spotted an old man in the park. Could that be the author? He wondered, excitedly making his way over. But just then, the moose called out to him. Hey, Harold, they both tried to talk to the old man. But he swung his walking stick, shouting, Get away from him! Classic misunderstanding. The moose, wide-eyed, realized how huge this world was. There are so many old men here, he exclaimed, looking around in bewilderment. Harold, determined to find the author, drew a bicycle, and off they went, pedaling through the bustling streets. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, the porcupine had somehow managed to open the magical door and entered the real world as a girl. Her first attempt at standing resulted in a spectacular wobble, and she found herself chatting with a nearby kid. Now, let's cut to Terry, a mom driving her car with her son Melvin. This kid has an imaginary dragon friend. He speaks with him. Back with Harold and the moose, they were riding their bicycle when suddenly a bus honked loudly behind them. Harold freaked out, swerving to the left, right into the path of Terry's car. It was a recipe for disaster. Just as they were about to collide, the moose transformed back into his cartoon form and crash. They all tumbled to the ground. Terry jumped out of her car, worried about her son, and rushed to check on Harold and the moose. Oh no, the wheel is damaged, she exclaimed, pulling out her phone to call for help. Meanwhile, Harold, never one to shy away from a challenge, pulled out his crayon and drew a new wheel right there on the spot. Melvin, who had been watching in awe, couldn't believe his eyes. "How did that happen?" Terry asked, turning around shocked. "It's my magical crayon," Harold explained with a grin. "It brings my drawings to life." Terry chuckled, thinking it was all a joke, but then she saw the wheel fitting perfectly on her car. "Oh, what's this?" Harold asked, eyeing a shiny locket around Melvin's neck. "Is that an animal whistle?" Melvin proudly showed off his shiny pendant, explaining it was an animal whistle for his imaginary friend. He gave it a toot, and oh boy, the sound was so high-pitched that even the moose couldn't handle it. He covered his ears and let out a dramatic no. Terry chuckled, saying, "My son has always loved imaginary things." Harold jumped in, excitedly explaining that they were on a quest to find an old man, the author who had drawn them into this adventure. But they also needed a place to stay. After some back and forth, Melvin managed to convince his mom to let Harold and the moose crash at their house for the night. Score! Meanwhile, the porcupine, still trying to locate Harold, spotted the old man and dashed toward him. But in a classic case of mistaken identity, the old man swung his walking stick, thinking she was up to no good. She quickly adopted a defensive stance, only to realize her newfound human form wasn't quite intimidating. At Terry's house, there was a garage with a mysterious upper room. Harold was wandering around when he found a dusty music note. "What's this?" he asked, intrigued. Terry smiled and shared that her childhood dream was to become a musician. But life got in the way, she sighed. With that, she left the room, and the moose fell into a deep sleep while Harold stared out the window, daydreaming. Melvin soon invited him to his room, where they admired Melvin's doodles of wacky animals. "Hey, what's up with this drawn wheel?" Melvin asked. Harold took his crayon, drew a butterfly, and whoosh, it came to life. "Now you try," Harold encouraged, handing the crayon to Melvin. A bit skeptical, Melvin drew a flying spider and blew on it. To their astonishment, it sprang to life. But then, in a plot twist that no one saw coming, the spider swooped down and gobbled up the butterfly. "Oh no, that spider looks dangerous," Melvin exclaimed. They both panicked and dashed out of the room, leaving chaos in their wake. Meanwhile, the porcupine was on a hilarious mission of her own. Still on the lookout for Harold, she spotted a random house with a delicious cake sitting on the table. Without a second thought, she dove in, munching like a true porcupine. The homeowner, understandably alarmed, shouted for the police, prompting her to bolt out of the house and leap over a wall. Unfortunately, she didn't see the cactus on the other side. Ouch! The next morning, Terry came down to find the kitchen covered in purple cake crumbs. "What happened here?" she gasped, seeing Harold, Melvin, and the moose happily munching away at the leftover treats. Just then, Terry noticed something unusual. The color of her house had changed to a vibrant purple. She looked around, mouth agape, as she realized Harold, the moose, and Melvin had turned her home into a whimsical wonderland. Terry stood in shock, trying to process how her kitchen had transformed into a colorful disaster zone overnight. Melvin eagerly jumped in to explain about Harold's magical crayon, but Terry just shook her head in disbelief. "Sweetheart, it's time for school." Harold, seeing the disappointment in Melvin's eyes, cleverly split the crayon in two, handing one piece to him. "You can help me find the old man." After dropping Melvin at school, Harold and the moose waited for the bell to ring. Melvin, ever the schemer, cheekily snuck out to join them, insisting he had promised to help Harold find the old man. "But first, can I get some cake?" he asked, eyes wide with hope. Harold shook his head. "Your mom said no cake. But how about ice cream?" With a flick of his crayon, he conjured up 3 delicious cones, and they enjoyed their sweet treat. As they were savoring their ice cream, Melvin spotted an old man nearby. "Hey, old man," he shouted, running up and giving him a playful smack. The old man looked bewildered, but it was a good way to prove he wasn't just any old guy. While rummaging through his newspaper, Melvin found an advertisement for a library, declaring, "The whole world is here." Harold's eyes lit up with excitement. "Let's go there," he suggested. But Melvin frowned. "It's too far." "No problem. Harold replied with confidence as he drew a skateboard for each of them. The trio took off, zooming down the street, leaving amazed onlookers in their wake. When they finally arrived at the library, they found a storyteller named Gary in full swing. Little did they know, Gary was a childhood friend of Terry's and had a crush on her, which made things a bit complicated. "Wow, your drawing looks just like Melvin's mom," Gary commented, but Melvin quickly jumped in, spinning a tale about how his mom sent them to find Harold's old man. Gary hesitated. "I'm not sure about this," but when Melvin mentioned Terry, Gary's interest peaked. "All right, I'll help you find him." They sat down at a computer, but things took a turn for the chaotic. Without a name, a face, or even a color, Gary was starting to lose hope. In a moment of frustration, he blurted, "Just search in the sky." Harold's eyes sparkled with inspiration. "That's brilliant." He quickly drew something big and impressive. Gary watched from the window as a giant plane appeared, and he suddenly remembered a book titled Harold and the Purple Crayon. "Wait a minute, this story is coming to life," he thought, bewildered. Meanwhile, the trio climbed aboard the plane, excitement buzzing in the air. But as they soared up high, the wind picked up, buffeting them around. "Hold on!" Harold shouted as he quickly drew a protective glass around them, ensuring they were safe from the gusts. Using the plane's smoke, they wrote a message in the sky, calling out for the old man. "This is a great plan!" Melvin cheered, but just as they were celebrating, the engine sputtered and went silent. Oh, they were headed for a crash landing. As the plane lurched through the air, Moose and Melvin were in full-on panic mode. Just as Moose got so scared he turned back into his moose form, Harold sprang into action. "Hang on, everyone!" he shouted as he quickly drew a parachute, ejecting them all safely out of the plane. Whoosh! Once they landed, Harold quickly scribbled Terry's number on the ground in hopes of getting a call from the old man. The chaos of the landing had attracted attention, and soon, Terry's phone began buzzing like crazy. Her friends couldn't help but call her, teasing her about the ridiculous situation. After a chaotic drop-off at school, Melvin found himself face-to-face with two bullies who were up to no good. When they tried to snatch his whistle, he elbowed one of them right in the nose, leaving the poor kid with a bloody souvenir. Guess who ended up in the principal's office? Meanwhile, Harold and Moose made their way to the store where Terry worked, just in time for her to confront them about the avalanche of calls. "Please tell me you didn't cause this," she sighed, just as her phone rang again. This time it was the principal calling about Melvin. With a resigned sigh, she told Harold and Moose to cover her shift while she rushed off to the school. As Moose plopped down with headphones to watch videos of himself, Harold noticed an old lady struggling to reach something on a high shelf. Channeling his inner superhero, he drew springs for her shoes, giving her a boost. Amidst the store chaos, a customer asked for Puma shoes. Harold, thinking on his feet, drew a real Puma. Suddenly, there was a kid in the toy aisle freaking out because his helicopter wouldn't fly. Without missing a beat, Harold drew wings for the toy helicopter, and it took off into the air. But then, things got wild. The kid's mother grabbed the helicopter, and before they knew it, she was soaring through the store, along with the old lady. The entire shop descended into delightful mayhem, while Moose blissfully watched his videos, completely oblivious to the ruckus around him. When Terry returned from dealing with Melvin's escapades, she was greeted by a scene of total chaos and promptly fired by her manager. As she left, Melvin convinced her that things would be all right, and as they walked home, Harold encouraged her to embrace her passion for music. "Do what you love," he exclaimed. Feeling inspired, Terry agreed and headed with the three of them to the ice cream shop. Harold drew a purple piano, and Terry's eyes lit up. When she started to play, a crowd gathered, mesmerized by her talent. Meanwhile, the porcupines stumbled into a cake shop, mesmerized by all the purple treats. But her presence didn't go unnoticed. One of the staff quickly recognized her, and she bolted, only to find two detectives waiting outside in their car, looking for Harold, Moose, and her. With a burst of adrenaline, she climbed a tree to escape their clutches. Just then, Gary appeared, pulling Harold and Moose aside. He held up a book titled Harold and the Purple Crayon. "You need to know about Crockett the author," he declared. Suddenly, everything clicked for Harold and Moose. Moose, feeling fed up with the real world, tried to jump back into the book. "Let me in," he pleaded, but of course it wouldn't work. Gary promised he would help them meet the author. Just as Harold was buzzing with excitement, Porcupine miraculously showed up at his place, but not without a hitch. The police, sensing something amiss, tackled her, and before they knew it, all three friends were arrested. In their cell, Moose moaned about how much he loathed the real world. "This place is a nightmare," he exclaimed. Harold, ever the optimist, decided to distract the grumpy officer by having Porcupine act all sorts of crazy. While the officer was preoccupied, Moose stealthily maneuvered around to grab Harold's crayon and snuck it through the bars. With a dramatic flourish, Moose entered the giant locker and used it to create a massive swing, smashing through the wall like a cartoon superhero. "Freedom!" they cheered, hopping onto the makeshift escape vehicle, a three-wheeler bike. Just as they were about to pick up Melvin, he was locked in a closet by the bullies. "Help!" he cried, but all he had was a piece of Harold's broken crayon. Channeling his inner creativity, Melvin drew his imaginary friend to life. "Go get him, buddy!" he shouted, and the friend terrified the bullies. Then his dragon flitted around like it had just discovered coffee, wondering where the heck it had gone until Terry stepped in, explaining its vanishing power like it was reading the ingredients on a cereal box, allowing Melvin to escape. Reunited, Melvin joined the team on their quest to find the author. They whipped out a GPS to track down his apartment, which was conveniently nearby. "I'm again," Harold declared as they sped off, Porcupine gripping the wheel like a pro, despite it being her first time driving. Meanwhile, Gary chased after them, eyebrows furrowed in determination. Terry received a call from the principal about Melvin's daring escape, and instinctively used the GPS to track her son. When they finally arrived at the author's home, an old lady opened the door. "Oh, you must be fans," she exclaimed before dropping the bombshell. "The old man is dead." Harold's heart sank. All his excitement deflated like a popped balloon. If his creator was gone, how could he continue his adventures? Terry pulled up just in time to warn him not to get near Harold, deepening the despair in Harold's heart. Suddenly, the vibrant world he'd drawn began to fade, and so did his friends. Everything he created gone, even the Terry wheel disappeared into thin air. Just then, Gary appeared, offering his help to Harold. With a honeyed voice, he manipulated him into handing over his crayon. But as soon as he had it, he locked Harold up and transformed the area into a volcanic nightmare. "Welcome to my ideal world," he smirked, explaining his diabolical plan. Meanwhile, Melvin was searching frantically for Harold when he got caught and locked up alongside him. "This isn't good," Melvin exclaimed, but not one to lose hope. He rallied Harold. "You've got to believe in yourself. Remember your adventures." In a moment of inspiration, Melvin handed Harold the other half of the crayon. Fueled by newfound confidence, they used a hot air balloon to escape Gary's volcanic lair. As they soared high, everything Harold had drawn came back to life, bursting with color and excitement. The self-confidence and trust he regained from Melvin's encouragement transformed his world back to the vibrant place it once was. Meanwhile, Terry, searching for Melvin, noticed her house regaining its color and vitality. "What's happening?" she wondered, her heart swelling with hope. As they reunited, laughter and creativity filled the air once again. Harold knew that with friends by his side and a little belief, they could tackle anything, even the challenges of the real world. In the bustling town square, chaos erupted as Gary unleashed his ideal world, riding high on his horse. Harold and Melvin quickly grabbed hold of the rope to bring him down. With determination, Gary tried to confront him by drawing an axe, but Harold countered with a sturdy piece of wood. Undeterred, Gary then pulled out a stone-throwing machine, and Harold responded with a spring to deflect the incoming projectiles. In the heat of battle, Gary swallowed a piece of Harold's crayon, instantly granting him superpowers and transforming him into a menacing ancient figure. Terry arrived just in time, mistaking Gary's dramatic appearance for a costume and jokingly invited him to rule his new world together. But her lightheartedness only fueled Gary's anger. Fueled by rage, Gary created a weapon that slammed into the ground, splitting it open and creating a volcanic eruption. In the midst of the chaos, Harold dropped his crayon, leaving him feeling helpless. Just then, Melvin called out to his mom for help, and she handed him an animal whistle. With a mighty blow, Melvin summoned his fiery imaginary friend, a dragon that soared into the fray. Gary, undeterred, quickly erected a shield to fend off the dragon's flames, boasting about his impending rule over the world. But Harold remained steadfast in his belief in the power of friendship. Suddenly, Moose and Porcupine burst onto the scene like a duo of stuntmen, ready to help. Harold explained his predicament about losing the crayon, and Porcupine, using her keen sense of smell, found it and passed it to him. Armed once again, Harold drew a spider and sent it straight into Gary's mouth, retrieving his crayon. As the dust settled, everything returned to normal. Realizing the folly of his arrogance, Gary began to change, shedding his villainous persona. In a moment of redemption, Harold offered him another chance. "Why not enter my imaginary world?" he suggested, creating a door from his own stories. As Gary stepped through, Terry was left stunned, witnessing a clone of herself on the other side. Just as the door began to close, Melvin's imaginary friend ignited it, ensuring Gary wouldn't return easily. With the confrontation behind them, everyone gathered at the author's house to explore how Harold's world came to be. Inside, they found a treasure trove of sketches and scripts, along with a heartfelt note from the author. It spoke of how everyone possesses their own crayons, self-confidence, talents, and the power of imagination. If they learned to use these crayons, they could create their own worlds just like Harold. Moved by the author's words, Harold, Melvin, and Terry embraced their unique abilities. Just then, Melvin surprised them with a set of colorful crayons. "Let's make our own world," he exclaimed. With excitement in the air, Harold began to draw. A door to his comic world, Porcupine, Moose, and Harold returned to their comic world, creating a vibrant, colorful world filled with adventure. Terry and Melvin joined in, playing with their imaginary friends, as laughter and joy filled the scene. And so, with hearts full of imagination and friendship, the story came to a joyful end. Then his dragon flitted around like it had just discovered coffee, wondering where the heck it had gone until Terry stepped in, explaining its vanishing power like it was reading the ingredients on a cereal box.